Hi, everybody. My name is Mary Brimer, and I'm pleased to introduce today my colleagues Traci Kelly and Rulla Pontarelli. We are all independent financial planners through Independence Financial Partners representing our individual practices. And today we are interviewing our colleague Victoria Lombardi. She is the managing partner at Assalone and Associates and represents men and women going through divorce. And we thought it would be a great opportunity to interview her since February is the month of love. We thought we would talk about love and money, financial infidelity, and why there's a spike of divorce filings in the month of March.
Beautiful. Thank you, Mary, so much for having me. And I'm very happy to report that in the last year, we have moved from Assalone and Associates to now Assalone and Lombardi. So I am moving up in the world, so to say.
It's a big deal. Congratulations.
Thank
Congratulations.
you. Thank you very much.
Very exciting. So I guess we can kick off by asking you, what in your practice, what do you see the first financial misstep that clients make when beginning the divorce process? And how do they avoid it? How can they avoid it?
So I have to, disclose that I practice in the state of Rhode Island. So a lot of the information that I'm giving today is going to be Rhode Island-based information. For anybody that wants to get more information about their specific state jurisdiction, contact lawyers in your area, get good advice, get good specific examples. But very generally speaking, most states, when it comes to a divorce process, they want an open hand of poker financially, right? They want all the cards on the table, everything laid out. Documents will be exchanged. So, a mistake that I see people make is in their fear, they try to move assets, hide assets. They start to do things very differently, anticipating filing for divorce. And that can sometimes be a major red flag to a judge where they start to say, oh, somebody's playing funny with money. I don't like that. So, I'm always advising my clients keep everything as is, right? It's all going to come out. We're all going to find the money at the end of the day. So don't start hiding. Don't start moving. Don't start doing any flailing activities because you don't want to be perceived as a bad player in front of the judge.
Great input. Hiding is never good. It always comes out of the woodwork, like you said. Thank you.
Right? The truth will set you free.
That's right.
Yes, it will. Victoria, as an advisor, my main focus is helping my client build an amazing and a beautiful financial future. How do you counsel your clients on dividing things like retirement assets or maybe a family business without completely tanking their financial futures?
So, I mean, the beautiful thing about our practice is, and really any lawyer worth their merit, is that they are going to rely on the greater community of professionals around them. So that is your CPAs, your financial advisors, your tax professionals, right? I am not those things. The only math that I can do is divide by two. So I'm leaning on individuals like yourself a lot to say, okay, what does make the most sense for you? How is it going to set up their financial future? And, coordinating with those within the confines of the law. I will say that in my own analysis of when we're doing an equal split on assets, right, I'm flagging, is this a pre-tax account? Is this a post-tax account, especially for retirement vehicles? So that way we're comparing apples and apples and not apples and oranges. And then the other big thing I'm telling people right up front is most retirement accounts have functions in divorces to divide without penalties and without tax consequences. So again, don't start panicking and liquidating assets because you could be hit on a tax side of things where divorce provides you an avenue to do it without those penalties.
Beautiful.
So,
Let the advisors be the advisors.
what role would you say timing plays in divorce filings? There seems to be a spike of filing in March and also in September. And I've heard that there's theories that the kids go back to school and for whatever reason, that seems like a good time. Or in March, that we're kind of getting through the longest part of the winter. People are doing their taxes, they're on top of their money. Maybe the holidays have brought on additional stress. What do you see in timing and what would be the perfect timing?
I mean, it's such a personal piece, right? But as you've pointed out, September for the kids, always we see it come around there. I normally equate it to you've just come through summer vacation, and normally it's a parent that's kind of opening their eyes at the end of summer and being like, I'm doing it all anyways. Why am I bothering this now? And then tax time, right? For a lot of folks that are not transparent with one another and how they run their finances and how things look, when they get that tax return and they start to see the numbers and go, wait a minute, hold on.
Things are
It's
getting better.
right. It's an
Nothing's
eye-opening
changing.
experience. And then when you've just had to have, Christmas, Hanukkah, Thanksgiving, the slew of holidays with your in-laws, and you're sitting there going, not only do I not stand these people, but I'm not, getting any of the financial benefit anymore. It's an awakening for a lot of people in a season of rebirth indeed.
Right. I always like to remind people when Thanksgiving rolls around that the night before is the highest DUI night of the year because people are out drinking to avoid their in-laws. That's a bad sign.
Right,
Or a
exactly.
bad
Those are the
indication of
things.
things to come.
Right. But I mean, as far as like preparing financially for it, it is collecting your documents, right? If you're somebody that you are very involved in finances and you have access to all the information, just start, downloading, saving. If you're a paper file person, gathering it, getting yourself organized. If you're somebody that's on the spectrum that you're not very familiar with the finances, ask questions, right? See if you can get access to those, because the more information that you can kind of have in hand up front before you start, it alleviates a lot of the fear of what happens next because you already know what the field looks like. And if you don't, it's not a big deal. Divorce provides for discovery, which is a formal process that we exchange documents back and forth. So you know exactly what's there at the end of the day.
Amazing. It's amazing what can be discovered that one might not have known about, right? You've seen it
Oh,
all.
Yeah.
You've seen it all.
Mm.
Or
yes,
just when
line
you
by
think you've
lines
seen it
of
all,
bank
there's,
statements.
oh yeah, sure of it.
Yes.
I guess with that in mind, how do you handle cases where one spouse has no clue about the family finances and or how to manage finances, and maybe what are some of the red flags?
Yeah, so I mean, for a lot of people, it starts it's not insidious up front, right? For many people, they're either not great with money or it stresses them out, and so they get into a situation where their spouse says, "Oh, I'll handle it, don't worry about it," and so they kind of willingly give up that control. And when it comes time for the divorce, for some reason, people feel a lot of shame about that. I think, and not to be gendered, it's 2025, we're not supposed to do that, but it is consistently women that I see that when they're coming back and they're saying, I don't know what exists. I've never been involved in that. I don't want to be involved in that. I don't have the head for that. There's some shame around that. And so, working through that kind of to say it's normal, it happens, it's not a bad thing, but it is educating them, right? So that's where, again, I'm pulling in individuals like yourself to say, okay, well, through this process, we're going to have to get good with the lingo and we're going to have to start diving in. And after this process, you're going to have a team or an individual that can support you going forward. So, those pieces always kind of come into play. As far as red flags, right? Most states, I believe all states have a form that when you file that you're disclosing your assets. So if we're going down saying, what's this, what's this, what's this, what's this? And they're going, I don't know, I don't know, I don't know. I'm going, great, no problem. We're just asking for that in discovery. So that way we can flag, right? Businesses, if a spouse has a business, is normally tricky. There's normally money that's kind of moving above the board and below the board. And so, kind of trying to educate them about that and explain what we're looking for in there, those pieces. But I mean, if you don't know what's going on in your household financially, you can consider that a yellow flag to begin with. If you ask your spouse and they say, oh, yeah, here are the books, right? Great. Now we've moved to a green flag. If they say, don't worry about it, you don't need to know what's going on, now we're a red flag.
Thank you. Maybe taking this as an opportunity to, after 23 years of practice, and I'm sure the same goes for Mary and the same goes for our colleague Traci, we typically try to educate that maybe undereducated spouse to just invest themselves and learn a little bit more. It's not to say that they have to know everything about the financial picture, but in most of our cases, we do see that one spouse typically handles the finances where the other is much more hands-off. Mm-hmm. We don't like to see anybody put in the predicament where they enter a divorce situation and are uncomfortable. But again, that's what we're all here for.
So with the whole divorce process, there's so many emotions. You mentioned shame, anger, sadness, the whole gamut, but some things actually do just boil down to calculations. So with regard to alimony and child support, what are some of the biggest surprises that clients don't really know about those calculations?
Yeah, so child support, I'll say, is the easier one to kind of tackle because I believe almost every state has a calculation that they run. It's state specific. They take different things into account, but it's computational at that point. Rhode Island, where I predominantly practice, we use your gross income for calculating child support, not your net. So many people will sit there and say, well, wait a minute, I can't, afford this because when the taxes are taken out and the judges are going, sorry, that's not how it works. So that's pretty groundbreaking and shocking for a lot of people. Other jurisdictions, might do it differently, but most of them have a hard and fast calculation that they review every couple of years and fine tune. Alimony is a little bit more of a wide open area because that is hyper state specific. So I practice, in Rhode Island, and in Rhode Island, it is our statute provides factors that the court can consider and look at. It's not a calculation, right? We're looking at the length of a marriage, the ability of one spouse to pay, what the other spouse needs based on their specific financial situation. And so it's this kind of animal that we wrestle with of really digging down in, and it's so individual and case specific. Other jurisdictions have an alimony calculator, just like a child support calculator, where you punch in the numbers, it spits out the number, and that's what it is. Have a nice day. So, I mean, it's really getting familiar with your jurisdiction and understanding those things. Some states, alimony happens all the time. Without a doubt, you're going to pay it. Other states, it's very rare, and the judges aren't inclined to award it. So, those pieces are, a little bit more complicated as you get into your specific situations. But child support, it's a calculation, and in most states, you're going to pay it like death and taxes.
I guess that's where having a good legal relationship and a relationship with your advisors to help you through those calculations and clarify and understand gives you a little bit of peace of mind.
Right. And there's a question of, for child support too, what counts as income, right? So, military members in Rhode Island, if they're getting basic housing allowance or some of those other benefits, Rhode Island scoops and says that can be counted as income when calculating child support, right? Business owners, some of the things that get written off, as expenses, the court might be able to say, oh, no, we're going to roll that back in. So, getting involved with your team and making sure that there's a clear financial picture so that way what you're actually playing with when you get, into the legal field it's a huge difference maker.
So besides assets, sometimes couples bring debt and joint debt together to add on to that financial accounting report. What is your advice for splitting debt? Credit cards, mortgages, student loans?
So, student loans sit different in Rhode Island. Student loans are not divisible in a divorce because you don't get to take the benefit of somebody else's education when you leave them, right? Debt, on the other hand, it's right. Like I can't take, my
But
husband's degree.
I argue all the time with my clients, the young ones that are considering getting married, is that you've made this six-figure investment in your college degree, and women are outpacing males on their earnings, that many women are shocked to find out when they get to divorce court that they actually owe him alimony, particularly if he's doing more at-home parenting and picking up the slack. So I always look at the investment in the college education. That's the reason for a prenup, is to protect that investment because that's your earning power going forward. But that's just my advice.
Right. And I mean, ultimately, in a divorce setting, right, you're taking in many cases now, a two-income household, and you're making it a one-income household. So, the value of an education and being able to typically provide at a higher point for yourself post-divorce, it's always worth it. But, a judge is never going to say, well, okay, your spouse, got a master's degree and amassed all this debt, you have to pay for half of it. At least in Rhode Island, they're saying nope, because they can't
And
carry that degree going forward. Other
right,
states
and
might do it
not all
differently.
degrees, yeah, not all degrees were worth, aren't paying a return on investment either. Some of them were more pursuing a hobby or special interest than actually
Right.
pursuing a higher earning. Yeah,
Serving your soul rather than your pocketbook, right?
I
Yes.
understand. So how about mortgages? Mortgages and credit cards. The mortgage one has crept up more in the past 2 years since interest rates spiked. We're encountering folks that are forced to refinance within a specific period of time to buy the other spouse out. They need to cash out refi,
Right.
or to remove that spouse's name. They might not even need cash out, but suddenly they've gone from a 2.5% mortgage to an 8% mortgage, which is punitive.
Right.
And I've wondered why we can't just go do make a motion for a partition to remove one person's name, that it would be worth the cost, the expense of going to court and forcing the mortgage company to remove the name from the loan, provided that the co-borrower can justify and prove that they're able to carry the loan by themselves. But not everybody's been a fan of that because you got to pay money to go do it, but it's still cheaper in the long run than refinancing for 30 years.
Well, and situations like that can be explored if the parties are willing to work together, and have one hand
Right.
washes the other, right? In most divorce situations, though, spouses are not really inclined to make their ex-spouse's life any easier, given the emotions, the animosity, all those things. And the spouse that is normally receiving money or being removed from a mortgage or being removed from an obligation, they're kind of hamstrung because they can't get property because they're still existing under an encumbrance already. And so they're kind of left waiting on this process that might cost more money in the long run that then serves to benefit their spouse. But they're sitting here waiting, well, the market, the way it's going, my dream house has come for sale and is gone long before that partition can happen. And quite frankly, most people, when they come through a divorce, they hate court. They don't want to do extra court. They don't want to go through another
Right.
different court system. They want to get through it as fast as possible. And the judges, in family court, it's, in our jurisdiction, I'm sure in other jurisdictions, family court's the busiest court. That's where most people are going through. And so there's not the bandwidth or the resources, unfortunately. And most judges are not looking at it in the sense of, how can I set these people up in the best case scenario financially going forward? They're going, King Solomon, all right, here's the baby, cut it in half, cut it in half, cut it in half, move it along. So if, people are in a situation where they want to work out things better, that's where, utilizing ladies like yourselves, getting a mediator, right? Like exploring those deeper options that are not exactly what the court provides in a divorce process could be a great piece. But for most folks, if someone's getting bought out of a home that they raised their babies in or they thought was going to be their forever home and now they have to leave, they're going, screw them. I'm not going to make anything easier. And they're trying to keep that time frame for buyout as short as possible because they want to take the money and run. And it's not a bad thing. It's not a negative thing. It's a very understandable piece, but I normally don't see that kind of cooperation. And as far as punitive, I
Right.
mean, the courts don't care.
They don't care. No. And I think this is when cooler heads can prevail, and when you have good advisors coaching clients to do that, that they make out better by slowing down and really crunching the math. Because I notice more often the spouse that hasn't been in charge of money has very unrealistic expectations about their ability to carry on the house afterwards. They raise their
Yes.
kids, they don't want to move, emotions, driving that train. They're very unrealistic about what alimony and child support that in Rhode Island, it's usually rehabilitative. 3 years it's decreasing and it's over usually.
Right.
But they underestimate how fast 3 years is going to go, and if they don't get job retraining or something
Right.
doesn't materially change, they've lost an opportunity in that 3 year window to correct the ship really and get themselves on better ground.
Right. Right. And I mean, it's as you talk about cooler heads and doing that process, like that is the key to a successful divorce, right? If you and your spouse can come together, work something out mutually, with financial people to set everybody up moving forward, that's how you win divorce, right? Running through the meat grinder of the system, everybody, quite frankly, loses. And the courts, just given the volume that they see and what they deal with all day, they're very cold for a lot of people, right? That they left feeling kind of victimized. And that's just unfortunately the way it works. So, if it's possible to remove yourself to the extent of coming up with your own agreements that benefit everybody, that's the best case scenario.
Right.
They usually say don't make those decisions surrounding divorce when the emotions are running high, and to give
Right.
it a good 6 months or so. And that's usually the advice I give. But I know oftentimes it's easier said than done, right? Depending upon the hostility of the situation, the gravity.
Right. When I always say, like, somebody going through a divorce is like driving down the highway with heavy fog, right? Like they don't see the potholes, they don't see the other cars. It's all muddled, right? But having a good legal team, having a good financial advisor team, having those people, they're driving down that same road with you with no fog, right? So we can say, oh, there's the pothole, there's the car, there's the stop sign, right? And having that team that you trust is invaluable.
Agreed.
Great analogy.
It is. Thank you. All helpful. So, for someone rebuilding after divorce, maybe particularly in those first 6 months or so, what's the one legal or financial move you think they should prioritize? If
I mean,
anything at all comes to mind.
yeah, I mean, hiring a financial planner and advisor, right? Like getting somebody on your team that can take a look, whether you got $1 million in divorce or whether you got, 100,000 or, 30,000, right? Like any amount can be advised and invested and grown over time in a really strategic manner. And that's, where you ladies come in, and where it makes such a huge difference for people, right? The ones that kind of, oh, I don't know, let's see, and let's kind of wait it out. There's time lost in that. And so I'm a big proponent of, get professionals on board that can help you, that can steer you, especially if you're not a financially savvy person, right? Those people that are already, risk deep and get it and love it and can follow it up, right? Those are not the people I'm talking about, right? This is for, the busy people who have shit to do in their lives and don't have time to sit down and figure out, should I be investing in this kind of account or this kind of an account? Get a team.
Perfect. Well put. We concur.
Absolutely. Changing lanes for the folks out there who are in love and thinking about putting a ring on it. Asking for a friend about prenups, but when we're talking about prenups or postnups, how do those actually hold up in court? We hear things about celebrities and what their prenups did or didn't do, but in real life, how do they hold up, and what do you wish more people knew about them or put in them?
Right. So this is my favorite category. And as somebody who's in a phase of life where everybody is getting married, I'm not very popular with my friends as I'm sitting there banging on the table going, get a prenup, get a prenup, get a prenup. It's very state specific. So in Rhode Island, we have the benefit that prenups in Rhode Island are very, very secure. Most states have a statute that spell out different factors for their prenups and different things that can indicate if a prenup is not going to be upheld. Some states in between each one of those factors have or. Rhode Island has and, which means in Rhode Island, if a prenup is going to be found invalid, all of the factors that could overturn it must be present at once. So Rhode Island prenups are very, very secure. Other states where it's or, you might only need one of those factors present, for your prenup to be challenged. So again, I know you guys are sick of me hearing this. Check with your jurisdictions, ask a lawyer in your jurisdiction these specific questions. But the overarching goal of a prenup is for folks to sit down before they get married, pre-nuptial, and identify what assets they have and how they want those assets to be treated during the marriage and if there is an ultimate separation. So for many people, it's identifying these are the bank accounts, these are retirement accounts, these are the pieces of property. Either it's, it's mine and it's never going to become marital, or, this person is going to gain interest in it over time, or, it's kind of, choose your own adventure, if you will, right? Some people keep them very standard, cut and dry. Some people get very creative, but it's designed to give people a tool to come up with how things would be separated out while things are good, right? So while you still love this person, while the endorphins are high and you're like, we're always going to work it out and we can always figure this out. Great. Figure it out now while everybody's happy, rather than having a dogfight years later when you can't stand the sight of that person. It's very important to know that in all jurisdictions, I believe, don't quote me, but I'm fairly certain, we don't allow provisions about children to be contracted in a prenup. The reason is that there's so many variabilities for a child, and people can have Plan A before a child's ever in existence, and that child's needs may be so different from what the original plan was. So most jurisdictions are saying you can contract as to finances, as to property, those kinds of things, but not as to children.
How about pets? Can pets be included in the prenuptial agreement because they're property, domesticated ones anyway?
Well, what an interesting area, cutting edge area of the law that we have stumbled into.
Rhode
Some
Island is
juris
the best state for pet ownership. I love it here.
Well, it's just changed. So this is this new year, 2025. Before we treated pets like property, right? Like a table, like a chair, like a physical piece of property. We now have in Rhode Island a best interest of the pet standard. So we're now treating pets like children in Rhode Island, where we're identifying who was the primary caregiver, what is the schedule going to look like, what financials are going to look like. So traditionally, in a prenup, I would be saying people, pets are property. You can put them in a prenup because it's a physical piece of property. Now, with this new statute, it hasn't been tested yet. So I don't know if the courts are going to start to say, nope, you can't include a pet, or, if they're going to say, yeah, no, include it in, it's in there. So it's a, for the lawyer, right? It's a fun new question that's come up for us that we're kind of all navigating together. And again, jurisdictions may differ, right? Some may treat pets like kids, other may treat them like an end table.
Oh, that would get really interesting down here in Florida, where people have iguanas and alligators and snakes.
Oh
and
yeah, right.
really
Well, and then I always
interesting
laugh at
pets.
like,
Oh,
what's the new emotional support pet, right? A couple years ago, it
Right.
was the lady with the peacock on the airplane, right? Like, what?
I missed that one, but
Oh
I
yeah.
did find it interesting recently in South Carolina where there was a bunch of chimpanzees that escaped from a research facility. I was following up on that with a high level of interest because my partner is a physician. And I learned that a wild animal is not necessarily returned to its owner. So the research facility owns these
Oh.
chimpanzees, but the ownership would only apply to domesticated animals. Wild animals are considered free, like sovereign.
Wow,
And I just
sovereign
thought that was
animals. Who knew?
interesting. And I just thought that was actually incredibly interesting. And going on the pet thing, I recall from a previous marriage that I signed the AKC papers in my name because I thought if anything goes south, I'm keeping the dog.
Right. Well,
good
and
one, Mary.
before
Yeah,
this statute, that's what we would
Sarge
do.
was staying with me. I was the better parent. I was going to prove it. I signed the AKC papers, and then even in our will to this day, we still continue a pet clause with the Leona Helmley, version of it. Is that if the animals that we leave behind are not maintained in their standard of living they're accustomed to, everybody gets the goose egg.
Love
and,
that.
and you have my permission to put my dog on life support. Keep him around forever.
But I mean,
It's like
it
your
is such
baby.
for so many people, right? Pets are, they're not like it was, 10, 15, 20 years ago where they were just, that's an outside dog. No, like they're key members of the family now. And I mean, I've had some cases where people have fought harder for their pets than for their kids, unfortunately.
Believe that. Do believe
It's
Yeah.
just a
that.
great matter of being proactive while, like you said, your head is still cool. It's a similar way that I feel about life insurance. You're probably never going to need it. Set it, forget it, and move on with your life.
Right.
So set the prenup while you both love each other, and then go get your cake tasting on.
Well, and for a lot of people, circling back, it is in high school, right, they teach us the Pythagorean theorem and all this stuff that regular people never use, right? Like
Right.
they don't teach us how your things get divided if your family
Right.
unit doesn't make it, right? Like, so for so many people, they have this idea in their head of what they logically think would happen. But then when they get introduced to the laws of divorce and they start to go, well, that doesn't make any sense. Well, that's not what I thought, right? Most people have no idea. So by having the conversation about a prenup, it kind of makes people understand, well, okay, well, what would I get anyways,
Right.
right? What's the difference of what we agreed to versus what I would get? And so, again, I'm kind of the grim reaper of happiness in my friend group. When people get engaged, I sit them down and say, hey, congrats. Here's how you need to
Mhm.
understand, right? Like, this is how that house is going to get divided, and this is how those accounts are going to get divided. And for a lot of them, they go, oh, well, I didn't know that. Right, because nobody tells you these things, right?
Right.
You need to have those nitty-gritty conversations so you can decide either is it something that's for us or is it something that,
Right.
we don't need.
And
But
an
knowing.
important point of distinction is that it's important to have these conversations with licensed professionals in the state you reside
Yeah.
in, and not your friends and family that left out very important technical details or the law has since changed since they last went through a divorce.
Right, right. A divorce is like a birth story, right? Everybody's got a birth story of what happened to them, their aunt, their friend, their whatever, but it's different for everybody. Divorce is the exact same. So don't, rely on, unless, you have the benefit of a friend who's a professional in the jurisdiction that you're dealing with and you get, free advice on demand, God bless. But most people, right, hire the professionals, ask the questions, get the real answers.
Absolutely.
Yes, if you
So,
do have
so
those friends, take advantage.
Yes.
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 So shifting gears, let's get into the juicy subject of financial infidelity. Can you help
Mhm.
define that in the legal sense? And when is it something that the court is going to punish? The judge will get irritable with it.
So it is so judge and jurisdiction specific, right? I have had judges that don't get very excited about it and they kind of say, well, it is what it is. I have other judges that have taken a great deal of care to identify it. Most of the time, financial infidelity really comes in place when there's a physical affair that's happening and money is being backdoored out to that affair. Jewelry, vacations, gifts, all those kinds of pieces. Assuming that it is significant enough, a judge can say, we're going to pull back, and the innocent spouse can get credits for some of those things, right? I've also seen it in some cases where there is not infidelity, but I had a particularly gut-wrenching case where there was spouse and child abuse, very severe felony level abuse with firearms involved. And we went through the financial records and we traced and identified all of the expenses over the years on firearms, ammunition, and those things. And we were able to successfully argue in that case that she should not be responsible for any of those, and that money was able to be pooled back in the division because her and the children had been victims of abuse at the hands of those firearms. So it runs a huge spectrum. It's very case and judge specific, but really what we're looking for is I say it's like it's got to be like a Lifetime movie level of bad action most of the time for a judge to really sit up and kind of take note of it, right? Normally I'm looking at tens of thousands of dollars of money being
Mhm.
walked away on these things before a judge starts to care.
Mhm.
With regards to like alcoholism or especially now as marijuana is becoming recreational in states, in my experience in Rhode Island, the judges normally aren't pulling back money spent on those kinds of things. They're saying, well, if it was a problem, the person should have been left sooner. They're kind of
Wow.
treat it like you should have gotten out when you realized it was bad and not kind of waited in it. Again, it's a very callous approach. But,
It is.
we've had other cases where, you know, again, not to be gendered, but a guy's got a secret girlfriend for years and years, and we find out, to the tune of over $75,000 that she's got jewelry and all this stuff and vacations and things, and so that's been able to be pulled back in some sense. But most courts, when it comes to financial issues, they don't love to open the door and kind of start to look back at everything in the marriage because it can get very messy fast. And we say nobody would get divorced if we were looking at, every financial transaction over
Mhm.
everybody's
I would
marriage
think
over
it's
time.
very expensive and time intense to go back years on bank account statements to start tracing money, that it would have to be worth your while, like finding a whole other family.
Right. And that's where if it's a Lifetime movie plot that you feel like
Mhm.
that you're living, that's when we'll say, okay, let's open it up. Let's take a little bit of look and see what's there. Aside from that, you're married. So when you walk down the aisle and say I do to that person, most states treat it like you are business partners and every dollar you earn is together and every decision you make is together, whether that's true or not, in the minutia. So a lot of times it's kind of riding with it and you divide what is there as it sits. But if there's, a thread and there's something juicy there that's significant, then yeah, some judges will say, absolutely, let's do that. And then every now and then you get the callous judge that says, meh, I don't care.
I think that's such a, you made a great point, Victoria. I feel like it's such a tricky component these days with white collar professionals and just professionals in two income households in general, right? Where even though you are a unit and you do align in many ways, you might handle a lot independently of one another. You might not be concurring on everything. You might not even be discussing everything. But then in the eyes of the law, you're liable as having handled everything as one, and that can be
Right.
completely conflicting in a divorce case. Great to
Right.
know.
And it's funny. I see it a lot of frustration is like in innocent hobbies, right? So it'll be, somebody is like an avid golfer and their spouse hates golf, right? And so then we sit down at the divorce and they're like, oh my God, they spent thousands of dollars on all these golf clubs and the membership, and I don't agree with that, and I want to credit back for that. The answer in my
Right.
jurisdiction and many is no, right? Should have left him
Interesting.
sooner if you didn't like that he was golfing too much, right? Or if they're whatever it may be, right? So it's a hardcore approach that the court takes to a lot of these things that for a lot of people, and I'm the bearer of bad news a lot of the time, saying, well, yeah, logically that makes sense, but under the law, that's not how we do things here, and I'm sorry you're not going to get that money back.
It's tough to make an argument for certain things, it sounds like.
Yeah. Well, in
Oh,
many cases, there's no basis for it, right? Not even making the argument, and if we tried, the judge is kind of like, no.
wow.
And I'm always counseling my client of, and any lawyer in any jurisdiction, right? If they know they practice the area, they can kind of, use their crystal ball in a sense and kind of say, okay, based on this judge and based on what we've seen them do historically and based on the precedent, right? He might go this way or they might go that way or they might do that, right? Like that's where, having those strategy discussions with your team and kind of understanding like where they fall on the spectrum and what it could look like, right? It's not black and white in family court. It's always shades of gray.
Okay, interesting. So if a spouse suspects that a partner, and we might have sort of already covered this, but I'll just repeat, if a spouse suspects a partner is lying about money, what should they gather before calling someone like yourself?
I mean, it's anything and everything that they can get their hands on, right? So if they're able to get bank statements, if there's already a financial advisor in play, if you're married and it's marital information, you're entitled to it, right? So picking up the phone, hi, can I have copies of those things? Getting tax returns. The more information that they can have in front of them is helpful, even if it's all Greek to them, right? That then they can turn and they can hand it to a professional and say, okay, help me make sense of this so we can see what it is and where it's going and how money's being moved, and then identify what is going to be kind of up for grabs, what's going to be big ticket items and targets, and then identifying what we need to go looking for in discovery.
So in the event that we have one spouse who's like just drained everything, maybe with or without the knowledge of the other spouse, or they have just racked up ridiculous credit card debt, and it's really one-sided. How does the court perceive that type of situation? Is there any justice or balance or reining that back?
I mean, it's the frustrating lawyer answer of right. It depends. In many circumstances, though, no, right? Like unless there is some really nefarious plot at play, or unless that there is something that can be spooled back. Most of the time, if it's just a spouse was out of control in spending, right? Well, the judges can take into consideration and they can allocate out what they deem to be fair, depending on the state statutes and how it is. Rhode Island is equitable division, not equal division, but 9 times out of 10, our judges are applying an equal 50-50 standard to it. There can sometimes be balancing of assets. So, if one spouse has a massive amount of credit card debt, but they should be getting money from a retirement account or money from the house, right? We can kind of balance sheet that so that way they net out to the same amount of money, and there's can be some creativity in that sense. But for the most part, what I'm seeing is it's that whatever the assets are right now, we're dividing those 50-50s, and it has to be very, very extreme facts and circumstances for the judges to deviate
Right,
from that. So, I mean, it's
right.
again bad
Yeah,
news for a
and I
lot of
would think,
people.
especially if it's a joint account, that's almost like giving the consent there.
Well, and even
And
not joint accounts because you're married, right? You're business partners.
right,
So the court assumes, right, even if it's, even hidden assets a lot of times. Well, I had no idea my husband had this much credit card debt, right? Well, okay, if it was from gambling or on a mistress or something like that, okay,
mhm.
great. Maybe we got a shot. But if it's just he's bad with money and I had no idea, you married him, so
It's a
you
little,
ride it
it's a
all
little
together.
hard to claim willful blindness, though. There's generally signs. It's Finding a
Mhm.
whole other family, a whole other life, that's different. Finding a gambling or a drug habit that you didn't know about. But the bad with money thing, generally people know before they walk down the aisle.
Right. Or they
Well,
have
and
indications in their
there's the
marriage, right?
point.
Right. And
Right.
not
So
to shoot love in the face, but like, ask questions early and often. And if it seems like there's issues, right, maybe that's the time to start having conversations with professionals, not when the last straw has struck.
Well, and to your point of ask questions and also behaviors sometimes speak louder than words. So, some are savers, some are spenders, and sometimes that's a big off balance. So there's always, special circumstances. But I think to the point of if you know how some of these laws work, you might look at these situations with a little more, some caution.
Right. Right. I joke Rhode Island is a very Catholic state, so a lot of people when they get married, they do the marital coaching with their religious leaders. I joke that there should be divorce lawyers in those conferences, right? So that way we can be saying, "Great, how are you going to solve disputes, and do you know that this is how this goes down?" Right? That.
Well, at the end of the day, it's a binding legal
Right.
agreement you're entering
Yes.
into. Love aside,
Right. Marriage is a
Legally
legal
recognized
construct.
business relationship. Yeah. Yeah. For
We're
the
not being
IRS.
pessimistic. It's just the reality, right?
no.
You don't walk into it wanting that or thinking that way, but the reality is it happens more often than not. You just have to be prepared. So, Victoria, you should volunteer yourself to be present in those religious.
Yeah, I'll be standing. I'll be drummed out of every church in Rhode Island.
Exactly.
So bringing this to a close, I want to hit on one subject we didn't touch on yet, and that's cryptocurrency, which is something very popular. Like you had mentioned earlier, marijuana becoming recognized recreational in states. Cryptocurrency is becoming a recognized asset or more popular asset, particularly amongst younger folks, I would imagine you encounter. How is the court viewing crypto? Because I would think that somebody could make big shifts on that. They would hide it. I always worry about losing the crypto. If you're dead, how do you get facial recognition to get in and get your money?
Right.
How are you going to
I'm
get that Bitcoin out if nobody has any of your keys? Like I mean, it's a real serious thing in estate planning, and I'm sure in your field and family law.
Yeah, and it is so hard to get your arms around it because it is a whole new nomenclature. It's a whole new system. So, in the last 5 years, I've seen, a huge boon in like CLEs on cryptocurrency, offered not
Hmm.
only to lawyers in our state, but to the judges too, because a hard wallet, a soft wallet, like a judge doesn't know what that means. They're pulling out their physical wallet and being like, what the hell is this? So the biggest piece if you don't know about it truly, the way that I normally find crypto is just bank accounts, right? Like, okay, well,
The
$5,000
transfers.
here, right? Like I'm seeing it in those transfers that are kind of like given the red flag, right? There are ways that we can subpoena information from people individually, but with crypto being what it is, there's no central institution. Like I can send a subpoena to Bank
Right.
of America and say, give me the records. That doesn't exist in crypto. So it is one of those areas that if somebody's not super savvy in it, either the lawyer, the judge, or the individual, it can be a hot mess, quite frankly. And so, if you have a spouse that is very tech savvy or kind of indicated those things, that's questions that you need to be asking the lawyer that you're planning on working with right up front. What do they know about crypto? Have they experienced it before? What is their level of familiarity with it? Because I've seen spectacular lawyers, really kind of not know what to do with it just because it is such a smoke and mirrors kind of thing right now. Because they can't get
Hmm.
their physical hands on it, they struggle with understanding what to do with it. And in family court, it always comes down to what do you value it at, right? And there's
Right.
for many judges, they don't understand the basis of how crypto is actually valued. And so, they're looking at it going like, oh, this looks like it's 6 cents. Like, no, 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 it's way more than 6 cents. Um,
Right, right. Well, that, or it could be trading on a high, like it was, Bitcoin was trading at 65,000 at one point, and then it plummeted down to
right.
below 20 for the better part of 2 years before it made its rebound recently.
Right. And so
So
they
what
try
the
to
value
apply
was
it.
when you file is not the same, right? How do you come up with the money that's no longer there?
Right. Well, it's state dependent too. So some states will say, right, like it's not the value when you file that you're cut off in time. It's value as of a date of division that's either agreed upon or when your divorce gets finalized, right? So you're
Mhm.
not locking your assets at the start, you're locking them at the end. And so depending on how the market rises and falls, yes, some people are just kind of left holding the bag. It's the same thing with stocks. It is fluid in that sense. But again, if depending on your jurisdiction and how you do things and your lawyer's comfort level with dealing with them, if they don't know that that's how that works, right, they're not even asking that question.
Would think that it would be a tremendous bargaining tool to utilize upfront if people are calm and just want to simply get divorced and part ways, that having that asset that's liquid, unlike a retirement account, unlike a house, that could be used to divide in the division of assets if people are being cooperative and being cool-headed about it.
Right.
That would be an opportunity that could be utilized. So it's important to not go after it like it's an asset and I want my half, but to go at it as this is an opportunity we have to shore things up quickly and part ways.
Right. Well, and you know, I don't like to make assumptions, but most of the time, people that have crypto want to keep their crypto, right?
Right. Oh yeah,
It's
yeah. It becomes very sentimental, like stock
right. Well,
passed
and like
down by
not even like a
generations.
culty thing, but they're very like it's like this is gonna hit. You know what I'm saying? Like people have like a
Yeah.
deep
Yeah.
like emotional, almost like voodoo connection to their crypto.
Oh
So
yeah.
rarely am I finding somebody who's like,
We know
yeah,
all
give it
about
half.
it.
Right. So most people with crypto are going like, oh no, I'll keep that. They can keep that bank account. I want my crypto because this is going to be worth, $1 million someday. Right. Great. Beautiful. Maybe it is. So
Which could be another negotiating opportunity depending on
Right.
somebody's
right.
perspective, right?
So
So we have come to the top of the hour. We want to thank you so much for your time. This has been a wonderful conversation. If one of our listeners wants to get in touch with you, how would they find you?
yeah, absolutely. So they can either go on our website, assalonelombardi.com, or they're always welcome to give us a call. Our phone number is 401-400-4400. We like to make it nice and easy for people. We do service exclusively Rhode Island. However, if they have any questions about surrounding states, we have an absolutely spectacular network of attorneys that we're always happy to make referrals to.
Excellent. And because the three financial planners are representing independent practices, you want to do a quick roll call and we'll tag it in social media so you can find us. Rulla, you want to kick us off?
Sure, sure. We all work collaboratively, but my name is Rulla Nehme Pontarelli. I'm a certified financial planner and managing partner at Royal One Financial Group, currently based in downtown Providence. I've been a practitioner for over 23 years now and plan on another 23 years strong.
Traci Kelly Green Wealth. I've been doing this about 20 years as well. Jersey girl native, but I've been down here in sunny Florida for about 6 years outside of Tampa. And it's www.kellygreenwealth.com.
Excellent. And I'm Mary Brimer. I have Ginger Green Financial, and you can reach me at 401-295-1005. And we look forward to bringing you future podcasts on interesting subjects.